Welcome to the new school. My name is Fabio Parasecoli. I am the coordinator of the Food Studies program here. Just let me tell you a few words about what we do here at the new school. The program started in 2008 and it's been growing constantly. Right now we have more or less 30 courses about food history, culture, policy, politics, media, and now we're developing a new field in food and design. We're very excited about that. By the way, most of our classes are open to the public. So if you're interested in taking any course, just leave us your names and we'll be happy to get in touch with you. This event is part of a long series called Culinary Luminaries, and the series itself is part of our public program. It's part of the new school tradition to have these events open to the public, and we've been working to cover different aspects of food culture. So today we'll have this event on Marcella Hazan. On June 16th, we're going to have an event on fat studies. So all about body image and health and obesity and how it's been dealt in the public discussions. Again, if you want to have information about our events, leave your name and email. We'll make sure to keep in touch with you. Last but not least, we have an online journal called The Inquisitive Eater. It's inquisitiveeater.com, and we accept submissions from anybody. It's not just for new school students and faculty, but anybody who wants to write anything from poetry to fiction to theory. We accept design, photographs, art. So check it out, and maybe some of you will feel like sending us something. And now I will let Andy Smith do the introductions. Andy has been teaching at the new school for now 18 years. He's the author of the New York food biography, and he's now working on a new encyclopedia, right? Yeah, from Oxford, and it's Savoring Gotham. And he will introduce the guests. Thank you.
As some of you knew, I grew up in Southern California. My closest friend was an Italian American, and thankfully, I was frequently invited over to dine with them. I had absolutely wonderful food. My mother, too, cooked Italian food, but she had professional help, Chef Boyardee. Does that? And then, of course, pizza was one of the treats that we could have if we went out to dinner. My first trip to Italy was 1962. As a 16-year-old, I was looking for spaghetti and meatballs, Chef Boyardee, and pizza. And I just want you to know, we started in northern Italy, finally made it down to Rome. There was not one food that I tasted on the way that had anything to do with the types of foods that I grew up with. And I have been in love with Italian food ever since then, and I'm absolutely honored to have this panel here today. When I came to New York, one of the first books that I bought was by a woman by the name of Marcella Hazan. And it was one of, I still have it. It was one of the treats that I looked at for Italian cooking, and it was one of the resources that I've used frequently since then. We have, I never met Marcella, which I've often regretted. I thought the next best thing, though, was to bring 4 people who knew her well and who knew her contributions extremely well, and this is the best I can do for myself and to also share with others. We have 4 incredibly good panelists. You have been given a complete biography on them, and I'm not going to go through and read it. It would take the entire time to do that. The first speaker that we will have is Victor Hazan. Victor is, of course, the wife and professional collaborator of Marcella. He comes to us from Florida. He flew in yesterday. and he dined on Japanese sushi last night, Japanese food last night. I just thought I'd mention this in passing. He was not only the husband of Marcella, he was also a collaborator on virtually on all of her books, period. We'll talk a bit more about that. He's also an expert in Italian wine, and he published a wonderful book on Italian wine in 1982. Our second person will be Susan Friedland. Susan is the former director of cookbook publishing at HarperCollins. She is the collaborator with Ray Sokoloff of Jewish American Cooking, and has at least two cookbooks on her own, Ribs and Caviar. Is that correct? More? Just those? There were many more. These are the Ribs and the Caviar. It sounds like a nice juxtaposition of the two. It sounds
There were
great.
holes in the market, Andy.
Our third presenter, we'll move on. Our third presenter is Michelle Ciccalone. Have I pronounced it correctly?
Ciccalone.
Ciccalone. Oh, we got the E in the end. Who has published 16 cookbooks, 1,000 Italian recipes, pizza any way you slice it, and the one I must admit I love, and large numbers of other Americans do too, the Sopranos Family Cookbook. How many of you have seen the Sopranos Family Cookbook? I was looking for some other items in there which weren't there, but it was incredibly good, and that's great. Our final panelist is Chef Cesare Casella, who is from the Institute for Culinary, I get it wrong. International Culinary Center. I got it wrong. I always say FCI, French Culinary Institute, but it didn't seem appropriate at this point because he is the Dean of Italian Studies there and is the author of at least 7 cookbooks, probably more, many more. He doesn't want to brag about them, and he is the owner and executive chef of 2 wonderful Italian restaurants in New York City. And if you haven't been there, I would encourage you to do so. I wanted to start with some personal questions, and Victor, you're the first person who can really answer these questions. All these stories about Marcella say that you married her in 1955 in Italy, brought her over to New York City, and expected her to cook even though she had not cooked much at all in her life. Is this true? I just want to get this out.
She hadn't cooked at all.
That's not much. Okay.
Yeah. Marcella had prepared herself for an academic career in the sciences.
And she had 2 doctorates in biological
in biology and in natural sciences.
And natural sciences.
From the University of Ferrara.
How many of you have dual doctorates in here? I just thought I'd ask. Okay, all right.
And however, she went into this because she was passionate about teaching, and that never changed in her life. That was the germ. At first it was about science. When we came to New York, it was an immediate necessity for her to cook. We knew nobody. We were just the 2 of us. The relationship with my family was not very close. And so she was alone, and she had to feed both of us. And she used, at the beginning, she used a cookbook by Ada Boni known as the Talismano della Felicità.
And this was your cookbook that you had when you used as a bachelor, is this
correct? That's when because I had been traveling and living in Italy for a while before I married Marcella, and I had to feed myself. So that's the book that I had, an old second-hand version of the book. And Marcella opened it up, and she looked at a few recipes, she tried a few recipes, and it wasn't very long before she realized that she didn't have to look at any recipes. It sounds like hyperbole, but Marcella had a natural, instinctive mastery of what cooking is and what ingredients do. And it can only be explained as cooking genius because that's what she accomplished. But I think if we have the time, I want to talk about something that hardly ever mentioned when people describe Marcella's background. And it is very influential in her career and her style of cooking and her dedication to a simplicity in the kitchen. Marcella comes from an area called Romagna. Romagna is part of Emilia-Romagna. It's on the Adriatic, and until recent times when it became host to many millions of tourists, it was mainly an agricultural and on the coast a fishing area. It was, and still is, an area largely of manual workers. The ethnic character of people from Romagna, and I'm not exaggerating, is very blunt. I Romagnoli, as you may infer from some of Fellini's film, who Fellini was a fellow Romagnolo, as Marcella was, I Romagnoli are very blunt, direct, and honest. They have very little use for pretense, for titles, for complications. And in their relationship with people, it sometimes even have not all the tact that might be desired. However, this relates, I think, to Marcella's accomplishment, because what Marcella dedicated her entire life to was cooking as simply as possible. And she was attached to it with the passion that perhaps only a revolutionary has. She didn't throw bombs. She was really a very warm-hearted revolutionary. But she did create a revolution that is only beginning to pick up speed now.
She was recommending such strange things as eating fresh ingredients sourced locally. This is in 1960s and 1970s?
Yes, 1973. Well, that was her background. Marcella never left her background. She traveled the world. She became known to many people around the world. She introduced her food to many other societies, but she never detached herself from that background of simple people working with their hands, with the products of the sea and the earth, and transforming these in as uncomplicated a manner as possible into delicious cooking.
And now, she's a good cook in the home, and all of a sudden she wants to take a class on Chinese cooking.
Because Marcella was a restless learner, a restless observer. One of the reasons she wanted to go into science is because she was inclined to look at everything. Nothing escaped her gaze. And we had started eating out. A very inexpensive way to eat out when we were living in New York was Chinese. She liked the food very much. She said, well, I have to learn how to do this.
So this is Madame Chu's cooking school?
And so she enrolled in Madame Chu's cooking school, which at that time was the foremost school of Chinese cooking in New York.
And Madame Chu goes back to China, and the students there want to take a class on something, and...
On anything, as long as it's cooking.
And
yes.
so Italian cooking was what they were willing to take a class on. So they
Yes.
arrive in your kitchen now, and they're
Yeah.
going to take a class on Italian cooking. Is this right?
That is correct. But it didn't faze Marcella at all. She just went on cooking the things that she had been cooking at home. And in fact, she had a few very tense moments at the beginning of her career when she assumed that everybody ate kidneys. And everybody bought squid from the market and came home and cleaned it, and so on and so forth. And she learned that maybe it wasn't quite everybody.
Not everybody.
Everybody.
So now, there's this cooking school going, and the New York Times covers cooking schools, but it excludes your wife's
they
cooking
didn't know.
school.
They didn't know.
So what happens? What's the next step?
The next step is that, well, this is a year after she had taught to those women from the Chinese cooking school. She was fed up with them. It was a long time to teach 6 people who came in week after week. So she said, I guess I don't want to teach cooking anymore. I'm going to go back to my career. And I said, well, wait. Why don't I write to Mr. Claiborne, who was then in charge of food at the Times and everywhere else for that matter. And I wrote him a little letter telling him what Marcella was doing. And in practically no time, he was on the telephone.
Okay. And he visited and had lunch with
Well,
Marcella
this is how lunch happened. He called and he said who he was. Marcella had no idea who he was. And he said, but I'm from the Times and I would like to interview. She said, okay. And when would you like to come? And he said, well, how about tomorrow at 12? And she said, I'm sorry, but tomorrow at 12, my husband is coming home for lunch. And he said, all right, well, what about Friday? And she said, yes, Friday's fine. So Friday at 12, and she said, you don't understand. He comes home for lunch every day. And he said, well, you know, I don't usually accept lunch invitations from people I don't know. He said, well, too bad. That's the, you know, if you want to come at 12 o'clock, you have to come for lunch. And so that's what he did. He came for lunch.
And he published the article on October 15th, 1970,
Yes.
and said very wonderful things about Marcella and the food that he consumed. And he has the final sentence on the piece says, and Victor Hazan wants to go to Italy and raise Chinese vegetables. So that this is true. I wouldn't make this up. So.
No.
So this love affair with Chinese vegetables was, or Chinese food in
Food,
general,
yes,
Asian food in general.
yes,
was very serious.
it's continued. It continued. However, Marcella's career after that article took off like a snowball rolling down a mountain, and it just kept getting larger and larger, and it excluded a lot of things that we were really interested in. It excluded Chinese cooking. It excluded pottery.
Yep.
It excluded flower arrangement that Marcella was very interested in. It just became a teaching and writing career.
Susan, now, you want to have some water first, go ahead.
It's all right.
We have now a cooking school going on. We have Craig Claiborne recognizing this, and now all of a sudden, Harper Magazine Press comes along?
Harper Magazine Press was an imprint of Harper and Row, as it was then known. Some clever person there went up to Victor and Marcella's house with a contract, as how I heard it,
yes.
more or less. And they signed the contract, and they wrote a book for Harper's Magazine Press. Which was classic Italian cooking, and it's a great book. But Harper's Magazine Press, I don't think they had a lot of experience doing cookbooks, and it kind of fell into a, I don't know, that area that many authors complain about of inattention. Judith Jones, through Julia Child, Judith Jones offered them a contract at Knopf and bought the rights to the first book that Harper Magazine Press had published. So that was in 1976, Victor said, and I believe it was 1994 or 3 that we signed that we got them back at Harper. It took 20 years or so for them to come back to Harper.
The book you did was published in 1997.
But we signed the contract in.
Earlier, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Michelle, you're an Italian-American family. What influence did Marcella have on you and the things that you've done?
Well, I've always been interested in Italian cooking, but my experience until 1970, I'd say, was based on this very simple home cooking of my family. We were very close to my grandmother. All of my grandparents were born in Italy, and so I learned a lot from them about cooking, about eating, about attitudes toward food. We did not eat spaghetti and meatballs, and certainly I've
Not
never.
Chef Boyardee
No,
either?
I've never tried it, but we ate very simply and very wholesome food, and it was very delicious. And we never went to Italian restaurants because my parents didn't like them. They thought the food was not the way we ate. In 1970, I got married, and my husband and I went to Italy on our honeymoon, and we traveled all over Italy, and from north to south. And we had a great experience, and it was really eye-opening to me to see that there was so much more than what I knew about Italian cooking. There were so many different directions that you can go. And I was always interested in food and cooking, but up till then I'd been a big Julia Child fan and learned a lot from Julia and her television shows and her books. But then when I came back, I began exploring more of Italian cooking, of the different regional cuisines, trying things that were beyond my experience as far as Italian food was concerned. And so I can't say that I remember the moment, but I was married in July of 1970. I was doing much more cooking than I'd ever done before. The article by Craig Claiborne was in October of that year. I'm sure that Marcella put me on a path to learn more about the other aspects of Italian food that I had already started to have some interest in.
Marcella ran a cooking school in at least 3 different locations, New York and Venice, is that correct?
New York, Bologna, and Venice.
And Venice.
Yes.
And those schools ran for at least 20 years, is that correct, even longer?
Yes, she started in 1969. Her last formal school sessions were in 2005 of what was then called
French
the French Culinary
Institute, and now is called the International Culinary Center. I've got it right this time. She did teach there quite a bit, and Chef, how did the Italian program start at ICC?
I think it started because Marcella, because Marcella was doing the class, teaching Italian class at the school, and I think they came out, and I believe Vito and Marcella and Dorothy together, they pushed Dorothy to understand the Italian food. It was the moment the people maybe there was more interesting in Italian food than French food, and in fact, they started the program, the Italia program, and then they changed the name too in the International Culinary Center because there was a difficult to have the Italian study under the French Culinary Institute.
And you now have actual programs in Italy. Why are you running programs in Italy on Italian food?
Because it was interesting when I meet Vito and Marcella, because I used to have this restaurant in 22nd Street. I meet for some event, and then after everybody left, Vito and Marcella was talking, then I was so this particular attention to them because I read before the books, I saw the books, and I don't give it so much importance because I thought this stuff is normal. I know what my mom cook, what the house we cook, what is the respect, like you say, to choose local, fresh, to keep it simple. And then, but after that I meet in person them, I started to read the book, and then they make me more strong. I believe, especially when there is something that you believe, that somebody else that told you is right. So how I was cooking is how Marcella was talking in the book, because she was talking about Italian cooking. And the Italian cooking is the simplicity, what is the ingredients, and you don't want to mess up too much, and you want to enjoy. The food is a science, but at the same time you need to enjoy if you want to transmit that joy to who going to eat and who cook it together. And I think Marcella, they make that, and I think the fact how the book they are read so. They write it so nice, and then you enjoy reading how much you enjoy cooking.
To what extent did Marcella Hazan influence American cooking? I'd love each of you to respond to that. Victor, you want to start? Do you have a...
Do I want to start?
Yes.
I think Marcella's influence is strongest in this area. Up to the time that Marcella became well known for her books, it was understood that the aim of great cooking was for the home cook to try to get as close as possible to the cooking of chefs. Marcella's message was, again, revolutionary. She said, no, that is absolutely the wrong direction. It should be the other way around. Chefs should begin to cook the way people cook at home, because the natural context of cooking is not the restaurant. The restaurant is an artificial creation. The natural context of cooking is the home. And I think this is a concept that still has to be fully established. But I think we're going in that direction. I keep reading about chefs who are reducing the number of ingredients in their cooking, who are getting back to basic recipes. It was a very difficult road, but Marcella never wavered, never gave in. This is what she was, and she stuck to it.
Susan?
Marcella had a lot of integrity in everything she did, and she just wouldn't be moved, and she gave respect to Italian food that Chef Boyardee had undermined just the tiniest bit. She really made it an interesting, to say, I mean, I don't want to get too, it was also, it tasted good. I mean, that was kind of the fundamental thing, is that her food was delicious. But she made Italian food extremely respectable. It wasn't red sauce anymore. It was all these wonderful ingredients that she found here and that she found in Italy. So that's, I think, her contribution is kind of raising the level.
Michelle?
I think Susan touched on a really good point about the ingredients. One of the things that I thought about today when I was thinking about this panel, thinking ahead, was all of the things that I learned about from Marcella. Porcini mushrooms, for example, the importance of really, really fine Parmigiano Reggiano. In my family, we had only used, we used Pecorino Romano. That's the southern Italian grating cheese, but the Parmigiano, the extra virgin olive oil. And it wasn't so much, I think, that people didn't know about these ingredients. Before Marcella, they really were not widely available. Same thing with those fresh vegetables that we're talking about. It was very difficult to get those fresh vegetables in many cases. So Marcella introduced these ingredients and created an interest in them. not just among people, not just Italian home cooks, but also chefs became more curious about them and sought them out, and that developed a market for them. So I think that was a huge contribution, not just to the Italian cooking, but to our ability to get good ingredients in general.
Can I just give a little illustration? Working with Marcella in Venice, I said, Marcella, what is this recipe? What is this puntarella? She said, it's, she showed it to me. I said, I've never seen it before. You can't give a recipe for something we can't get. I said, I've never heard of it. And she looked at me very calmly and said, you will. And I did.
Chef?
More I was reading about her book and I think about the history. I think Marcella, when Susan she say change how to eat red sauce to Italian food, I think there are two different cuisines. So Marcella she cook Italian food. The Italo-American food is another cuisine. They are no better or worse, but they are cooked with different ingredients. Marcella she cook with the ingredients that she believe, and I believe in the like the book editor. They want all the ingredients. They are what you can find there, but she manipulate some recipes to have the ingredients, but never. If you take every recipe, manipulate what is the philosophy, the respect the ingredients, respect the what you're cooking, because that is the strength they have, Marcella. And I think, and this I can't talk about home cooking, but in the restaurant, I think Marcella still to have influence, but they're going to have more influence, especially in the young American Italian chef, because they, in the way they respect, is a known food they change. They change the moment. Is the moment the same food that was in the 60s, in the 50s, they're going to be for many, many years, because it's the simplicity and the respect of the ingredients. But the philosophy, the local, all these put together is what Marcella tried to say, but there was a more difficult in the 60s and the 70s. Today is what everybody talking about, and they take the recipes. You see there are the minimum ingredients, but they come out a great flavor. So I look like the 73. Today is after 40 years, and they don't change too much. And the other people, they learn from her. I believe more and more American young chef cooking Italian, they look at Marcella, because it's the direction where to go. It's nothing. She transmitted what it was there, feeling how to eat Italian food and how to cook Italian food.
What's the future of Italian-American food?
Italian-American food?
Right. Italian foods cooked and served in America.
No, Italian food or Italo-American food?
Italian-American to begin with. We're going to deal with Italian food next.
The Italian-American food, I think, is a cuisine that you enjoy, and there is a respect the ingredients for what is the type of cuisine. For me, there can be French cuisine or Italian-American cuisine or Japanese cuisine. It's a not bad Italian cuisine because you enjoy it because of the culture. Today, if we have a lot of good Italian restaurants in the US, it's a thanks to the Italian American cuisine, because it's a process from to arrive today. The ingredients that we have today is a thanks the people that cook before without the ingredients. And the Italian food, I think there's still is normal. I'm Italian, so I hope, but I believe the Italian food is still the food they express what is eating, but what is, I think, is important in many different culture, different ethnic cuisine. You find today many more ingredients, Italian ingredients. The Italian product, they are not anymore in the Italian restaurant. They are in many different type of the restaurant and cuisine. So it means something's still good and going far away.
Michelle, where's Italian-American food headed?
I think that, for me, Italian-American food is usually used to describe what, in my mind, is restaurant food, Italian-American restaurant food. Because at home, I think that the people of my generation anyway, third generation Italian, American, people of my age, they were cooking very simple food to begin with. And it was very, very different, as I said, from the Italian-American restaurants. So what do we mean by Italian-American food? It's getting very hairy. I mean, everything, the lines are crossed. There are some excellent restaurants like Cesare's, which I've been a big fan of Cesare since, I think, the 80s, when Charles and I went looking for vipore outside of Lucca. It took us 5 tries to find it, but we were determined and we never were sorry. Cesare is a great restaurant, but I think a lot of it is being, I wish I saw more of that simplicity Cesare, because there are too many of the restaurants that I've experienced today that describe themselves as Italian in America are still overdoing food. And I hope that comes to an end soon.
I think people are trying to cash in on the nostalgia of Italian-American food. I think a lot of restaurants are trying to elevate, veal parm, and to make, but they are plugging into a kind of nostalgia rather than a purity.
Okay, Victor, comments?
I can't speculate on what food is going to be in a time when I'm not even going to be there. But I would like to elaborate on an answer I gave you earlier as to Marcella's influence. Marcella said something else at the beginning of her career, shortly after her book had been acquired by Knopf. And what she said is, what I've come to understand is that cooking, learning to cook is like learning a language. You can learn a language with an accent that you can never get rid of. You can learn a language with no sense of its syntax and construction, or you can learn a language that approximates the native authenticity of that language. And she said, what I would like to do, I don't think people can really learn how to cook Italian food unless they have been in Italy cooking. And Marcella launched what has now become a very widespread phenomenon, the idea of a cooking school in Italy for foreigners. She began that in Bologna. That was one school. Now I think there must be hundreds in every region of Italy. I think this is a very important principle. Don't, even if you cannot get to Italy, do not underplay the necessity of learning that language of cooking as it is really spoken. And this is one of our, I think, our great contributions to Italian cooking here.
I know that some of you knew her, and I know that some of you would like to ask questions of the panel. If this is being recorded, do we have microphones? If not, we do have microphones. Okay, so if anyone who wishes to ask a question or has a comment, some of you knew her very well. You're bashful. This group is bashful.
Hello, everyone. Marcella left such a big mark on the food world in general. Does anybody in the panel have any idea who might fill those big shoes in the Italian food world?
No.
Next question. Any other comments? No? There are a number of very good people who are writing about Italian food today, yeah? No? But none that can fill her role? Is that?
You know, you would have to establish what was her role. There are lots of good people writing about Italian food, but there's a kind of poetry to her books and a status that she achieved that I think would be hard to duplicate.
I'd say that I think the atmosphere has changed considerably. We have so much information coming at us from so many different directions, and people claiming to be experts on so many things. People go to different kinds of restaurants now on every different level. So it's a whole different atmosphere. I think it would be very difficult for someone to have the impact of Marcella because she was totally original. And I can't imagine a voice loud enough to have something better to say than Marcella has said.
Chef, comment?
I think there was a different time, and there wasn't too many people that write about Italian food, and then she wrote in the right way. It was more difficult for her because they don't have no. But today it's more difficult because everybody write about Italian food, and then without to know, is that people that write about Italian food, they spend the time in Italy, and is other writer that write about Italian food, spend the time in the Google, what is Italian food, and then you see sometimes they repeat the same mistake because they want the copy from another, and then from Marcella, she educate. I think is a difficult because it's a different time, and I think it's a difficult to find another personality that can express how much she expressed.
Other questions or comments? Okay, I have one for each of you. What's new? What are you working on now, Chef? You must be doing a cookbook. No.
No.
No, you aren't doing it. So what's up?
No, so the restaurant that only new I work with the Center for Discovery is a place upstate New York that take care for multiple disabled people with autistic, especially autistic, and the connection with the food and nutrition. And we have a farm, and there are about 700 people there we take care. But the food is through health. And we consider food is a medicine. So not only for me I spend a lot of energy in that because I believe and there's something beautiful, and especially when the food is not only something for party, but they can share with other people.
Michelle?
My latest book is the Italian Vegetable Cookbook. It's actually number 20. And yes, and it came out in March. And so right now I'm just enjoying having finished, the accomplishment of having finished my 20th book, and just came back from Italy. Charles and I have been doing some traveling and just relaxing and replenishing my ideas, and we'll see what happens next.
Susan?
I'm working on a couple of manuscripts.
Your manuscripts or somebody else's?
No.
All right.
You know, writing books, it's a mug's game. Now I'm editing other people's manuscripts.
Okay. And these are for
other publishers.
Other publishers. We'll leave it at that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And Victor, other than having a wonderful time in Florida, dining on wonderful food.
Yes. Well, when I'm at home, I dine on wonderful food.
When
yes.
you're at home.
But Marcella, during the last few years, was at work on a project that she had started at the suggestion of Susan Moldau of Scribner, to write a book about ingredients. And she filled many, many pages of notes. Marcella only wrote by hand. She wrote faster than anybody I've ever seen. I write extremely slowly. It takes me a long time to get from the beginning to the end of a sentence. Marcella would just go zoom, 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 zoom. And she had a stack of manuscripts filled with these notes. And it is, yes, it is about ingredients. There are also some recipes in it, but it is also a philosophical book in the sense that Marcella said, you know, she was beginning to object to this mania of searching for the hard to get, for the rare, for only the most privileged chefs have access to ingredients. She said, yes, it's important to get good ingredients, but what is more important is to understand the kind of cooking that comes out of those ingredients. And at one point with Marcella, we even thought maybe we'd call the book How to Cook Without Ingredients. But I don't think our publisher was very happy about that suggestion.
Speaking about her language, I understand she only wrote in Italian.
Only
is
in
this correct?
Italian,
And,
yes.
and so then you did all the translation from
Translation, also, you know, we had a lot of conversations
a lot of conversations.
that are not written down, but they are instilled in me. I remember nearly every word of the things that we discussed, because we lived, for 60 years, we lived one of the closest collaborations on almost every aspect of life that two people could have.
We have a question here.
I know for me, so many of her recipes, I love to cook, and one that stands out for me is her treatment of bluefish roasted on top of bell peppers and a crust of breadcrumbs and Parmesan cheese. So my question for you is there a particular recipe of Marcella's that you think of so fondly or crave? Like, I know her pork in the milk is one really famous recipe of hers.
She wants to know whether there's any particular recipe that sticks out in your mind, something that you really like that she did.
One particular recipe out of,
There's so
out of hundreds?
You can give more than one, all right?
Yeah. You know, Marcella one of the things that amazed me about Marcella is how successful she was at frying. Marcella said a long time ago, she said, I was born to fry food. And she could fry food that had no grease, no taste of oil. That was, and one of the ways in which she fried, I've been reading, you know, I read all the time what people are doing in the kitchen. And Marcella's batter for her vegetables and for other foods, her frying batter, was very simple. It was water and flour. This is a very important aspect of Marcella's cooking. I remember seeing somebody post something on Facebook about frying zucchini blossoms, squash blossoms, and the most incredible variations on batters. But if you could have tasted Marcella's zucchini blossoms, just opened out, dipped in this flour and water batter that had a little bit the consistency of buttermilk, dipped in, pulled out, that was one of the most sensationally delicious things that one could eat.
Okay. Any other comments on a specific recipe or more?
Every 20th of October, Marcella would greet me, would say happy birthday in very tender terms, and she would soon present my ritual birthday gift, which was green lasagna, Bolognese style, with green lasagna that may have had 8 or more layers of very thin spinach dough. It had bolognese meat sauce. It had bechamel. It had Parmigiano Reggiano. It didn't have ricotta. It didn't have mozzarella. It didn't have really any tomato except the little bit that was in the bolognese meat sauce. That is perhaps my favorite memory of Marcella's cooking.
I have 2 recipes of Marcella's that I make all the time. Anybody who's been to my house has had them multiple times. One is a pork loin that you cook in vinegar, and another is a pork meatloaf. And the genius of both of these things is that they're done on top of the stove. They are absolutely, I mean, they each have, 4 ingredients, and the simplicity is astonishing. And also the taste. Also, Victor, you should have mentioned that you won't eat chicken or eggs. Victor was a real challenge for Marcella.
Speaking about cooking on top of the on the stove, that was her preference and one of the characteristics of her, as opposed to putting something in the oven.
It's really brilliant.
Okay. Now, when were you inviting us over? You never miss an opportunity,
I think that stovetop cooking, you have to realize, comes from a time when most people didn't have ovens in their homes. So it is a traditional way for Italian home cooks to prepare food.
Other questions?
Excellent, Mike.
I want to thank our panelists. They were superb. They can remain here for a little while, so if anyone wishes to come up and ask questions that you were afraid to ask in public, you can ask privately. All right, come on. Thank you very much for coming. And also, thank you, Fabio, for helping us set this up. Pam Tillis is not here, but thank you for, is she here? She's not here. But thank you for the staff. They have done a superb job. This is recorded. It will be on YouTube. It will be available for anybody to watch it at no cost. So thank you very much again.
Yesterday, we went to